Okay, good evening, everyone. Welcome to the City Council meeting today's date, Monday, April 21st, 2025. I'm calling the meeting to order at 6:32. Clerk, please call the roll.
Mayor Menchaca,
Here.
Vice Mayor Chan,
Here.
Councilmember Ding,
Yeah.
Councilmember Herrera Avila,
Present.
Councilmember Wu.
Here.
We will now have some announcements from our Chief City Clerk.
Tonight's meeting is live streamed on the city's online platforms. If you wish to address the City Council during tonight's meeting on the item on this agenda, we request that you please complete a speaker's card and hand it to the clerk at this time.
First item, please.
Sorry, Madam Mayor, I'd like to correct one minor thing. I think you said 6:32. We're at 5:32, special meeting.
Oh, you're right. That's-
Yeah, I'm paying attention. I'm not sleeping through these things.
I'm sorry. I'm only nearsighted, but okay. Thank you. Stand corrected, 5:32. It was just a test. Okay. And we all failed.
Passed.
First item, please.
Madam Mayor, I have no cards for public comment.
Okay, next item, please.
Fiscal year 2025 to 2026 budget study session for proposed city operating budget and capital improvement program. Finance Director Kaholakula will make the presentation.
Good evening, Mayor, Vice Mayor, members of the City Council. Will Kaholakula, Finance Director for the City of San Gabriel. It is my pleasure to present to you tonight our initial proposed operating capital improvement budget for the fiscal year 25-26. This is the first time we're presenting the budget as under this study session, and there'll be multiple opportunities where we'll continue to discuss, and we'll talk about that more in the presentation. So as an overview of the presentation tonight, we'll take a look at the development and process of the budget that we've conducted so far, and then from there we'll look at a summary of all funds citywide, and then we'll move into a detailed look at the general fund, taking a look at an overview of the general fund financially, the revenue projections, expenditure highlights, our projected fund balance in the general fund, and then a 5-year forecast of the general fund. We'll take a look at the internal service funds as well as the special revenue funds. We'll take a quick look at the citywide staffing and personnel overview, our capital improvement program for fiscal year 25-26, and then the next steps in the budget process. So as an overview of the budget process of how we got to this point, so the budget prep began on January 28th when the department directors received their budget instructions and began developing their spending plans. On February 4th, at a public city council meeting, we had a budget kickoff discussion where we talked about budget priorities, the budget process, and the key budget dates. And then on February 13th, the department submitted their departmental spending plans to Finance. Finance took those departmental spending plans as well as the revenue projections for the upcoming fiscal year. We presented those to the city manager. And then from there, we had detailed budget meetings with the department heads as well as their respective staff, the city manager and finance staff. And basically took all of that information, put it together, and we presented it here to you tonight at this public budget study session. So summary of all citywide funds. So there are a total of 24 funds, all citywide, made up of the general fund, special revenue funds, and internal service funds. The general fund is the main operating fund at 65% of the operating budget at nearly $57 million. Special revenue funds are those funds that have resources that are restricted for particular purposes. There's 21 of them, that's 26% of the budget, $22.2 million. And internal service funds, for those funds providing centralized services to other departments within the city. We have 3 of those, $7.6 million, and that's 9% of the budget. When you break it out between operating versus capital, $83.8 million is operating, and then we have $2.7 million of new capital funding for fiscal year 25-26. Now, moving on to the general fund. And then so here is a summary of the general fund. So for fiscal year 25-26, we're projecting $57.7 million in revenues. That's revenue of $45.7 million, and we have a transfer in from the retirement fund of nearly $12 million. That's to pay for the city's CalPERS pension obligation, or CalPERS pension cost. And so revenues increased by $3.2 million, and then we have expenditures of $55.4 million, transfers out of $1.35, with total expenditures and transfers out of $56.8 million. So we have a projected net change in fund balance at this point for the general fund of $933,000. There'll be a couple items that we'll point out that makes that number up. We implemented a vacancy savings factor this year of 3%. This is a year where we exchange $350,000 receiving to the general fund for Prop A, our Prop A exchange. This year, we do that once every 3 years, and then it does not include any salary adjustments. So moving on into a closer look at the general fund revenues, we'll take a deeper dive into the general fund, beginning with revenues, and then Linda will come up and talk about the expenditures. So as mentioned earlier, total revenue of $57.7 million. You can see from the pie chart on the right that by far taxes is the largest revenue source. This slide presents the composition of our revenues. The second largest contributor to general fund revenue is transfers in of 21%. So those two combined make up 86% of general fund resources. And then from there, we have the additional 14% of general fund resources made up of the other categories, which are relatively a lot smaller than taxes and transfers in, but all very important. And then another perspective of general fund revenues, where we look at the year-over-year comparison. So total revenue is projected to increase by $3.2 million for a total of $57.7 million. The large drivers of that increase is taxes and transfers in of taxes increasing by $1.1 million and transfers in from the retirement fund increasing by $1.1 million. And then we'll look on the upcoming slides. We'll take a closer look at taxes to see which tax category is driving the increase of $1.1 million, as well as the other revenue categories. So here are a detailed view of all of our taxes. This is the line items for each of our tax categories. And then if you look at the pie chart on the right, you could see the large blue piece of the pie. That is our property tax and our property tax in lieu of VLF. So 2 lines of property taxes, that's 40%. And then we have our Measure SG and our state sales tax in the grayish piece of the pie at 28%. And then we have our utility user taxes at 16%, and then our transient occupancy taxes at 9%, with the other taxes making up a relatively small portion. So property taxes, you can see the 2 lines at the top, property taxes and property taxes in lieu of VLF continue to increase. This has been our most consistent revenue source as assessed values continue to go up with new construction, new developments, exchanges of properties, which results in new valuations, and then the Prop 13 2% inflation increase. And then moving on down, utility user tax, that continues to increase as utility rates continue to go up with consistent demand for utilities. And then we move into Measure SG and state sales tax. You can see that these two only went up slightly, $46,000 and $44,000 respectively. So what we're beginning to see in Measure S in sales tax is just, it's beginning to flatten out. The level of sale of taxable goods is beginning to slow. And so for this year, with the help of our third-party consultant, HDL, it's only projected to increase by less than 1%. Transient occupancy tax is also beginning to level off after it significantly increased after COVID-19. When the hotels reopened, it increased quite a bit, and now we're seeing more leveling off of our transient occupancy tax. So then here is a line chart that just kind of shows the major revenue sources and just the nature of their increase. It begins kind of at the end of COVID 2021. You can see the large increases, especially in the transient occupancy tax. And then as it moves down through the proposed 25-26, at the top, the two lines at the top are the property tax. The two blue lines continue to increase, and then we see the leveling off of pretty much the remainder of the lines except for the utility user tax, which continues on an upward trend. Moving on to the other general fund revenue highlights. So under licenses and permits, there's a decrease of $27,000. We see our building permits, a slight decrease of $100,000. Overnight permits, though, also are projected increase by $55,000. Use of money and property, which basically is our interest income, is projected to increase by $163,000. Moving into our 5-year forecast, this amount will probably be starting to decrease as interest rates are beginning to decrease. We have our fines and forfeitures increase of $70,000. Vehicle code fines slightly increase of $3,000, but our parking fines increase of $67,000. Charges for services at the top right increases of $380,000 as plan checking has a projected increase of $195,000. Fire services, charges for services increase of $95,000, and ambulance fees an increase of $41,000. And then under other revenue, we have an increase of $303,000, and this is where I mentioned earlier where we have our every 3-year Prop A exchange, and we're have $350,000 in the Prop A for the Prop A exchange this year. And then transfer in, this is from the retirement fund, as we mentioned, to pay for our CalPERS pension cost, an increase of $1.13 million for a total of $12 million transfer in from the retirement fund. So that's general fund revenues, and then Linda will discuss general fund expenditures, and then I'll bring it back and take it from the 5-year forecast.
Good evening, mayors and members of the city council. I'm just gonna go right on with our general fund expenditures. On the slide here, it shows the general fund expenditures are higher by 2.8 million, and this chart here is showing the expenditures by category. The largest category is personnel expenditure. It is also the city's greatest assets, which makes up 77% of the general fund expenditure, and that increased by approximately 2.1%. Operational increased by $286,000. That makes up 4% of the general fund. This category consists of expenditures used by the department, such as office supplies, program supplies for youth program, for adult programs, building maintenance supplies, uniform, training, etc. The next category down is contractual services, which makes up 7% of the general fund expenditures, increased by $363,000 that are used for services contracted out, outsourced. The next category of allocation is allocation to our 3 internal service fund that Will has mentioned earlier. That makes up 8% of the general fund. And for these services, they're provided for fleet maintenance, information technology support, and risk management. Our transfer out category decreased by $136,000. This accounts for one-time expenditures and operating transfers to the Mission Playhouse Fund. On the next few slides, we'll analyze what is driving the changes in each of these categories. This slide here breaks down the personnel expenditures for the general fund. As mentioned, it increased by $2.1 million due to increases in salaries and health insurance, not just for active employees, but also for retirees as the health insurance or health costs increase. A few personnel budget-related items that I want to point out in the chart there. As you can see, for full-time salaries increased by $529,000. Retiree health, $274,000, and health insurance, that's one's for a retiree and this is for active employees, $144,000. CalPERS unfunded accrued liability increased by $1.2 million. Overtime in this budget also increased by $592,000. And as Will mentioned earlier, we have a vacancy factor of 3% in for $826,000. So I just want to highlight some items here on the box, the bottom left. There's one position added in the current year for 24-25, which of course is full-time authorized, so it will carry on to the next fiscal year. Therefore, you see in the chart to the right for the staffing that it increased by 1 to the general fund. And again, this budget does not include any salary adjustments. It is status quo. There's 3% vacancy factor that is baked in the budget. Is in there, not yet recognized into later part of the year when we have better, well, during the midterm, a mid-year budget adjustment, we'll be recognizing. The fire overtime now is more consistent with the prior year's actual in the budget. And we will continue to contribute $250,000 for other post-employment benefit to the trust. As mentioned, the transferred out accounts are for one-time expenditures and operating transfer to the Mission Playhouse Fund. To the left here is the majority of what makes up the transfer out for fiscal year 25-26. You can see there for Mission Playhouse support, $629,000. And to name a few of them, there's projects such as a Vincent Lugo vehicle bridge repair. The wood beam is rotting and posing tripping hazard on this bridge. Therefore, replacing the wood beam will ensure the bridge structural integrity and safety for the park. There will be a comprehensive fee study recommended. They're recommended to be done every 5 years, and this is up for 25-26, will be the 5th year. There is a project for Allen May parking lot lighting to install commercial-grade solar lights, so that way it can enhance the night visibility and improve the overall safety of that parking lot that we have there. To the right, contractual budget of $4 million from the general fund. These are some of the items that you may be familiar with that we just want to do a quick highlight on. There's mental health services that we have in the contract for $53,000. Animal control for $590,000. IT subscription is not new, but we have kind of identified and kind of separate that out so you can see it more clearly on all the different IT software that we're using. That is for $475,000. Parking enforcement at $350,000. Fire dispatch for $278,000. And crossing guard, $200,000. And we have other legals, legal retainer, and other special laborers legals that is $266,000 and $172,000 respectively. And we have prosecution services for $155,000 in the budget. Moving on, this is a general fund operational budget, increased by $286,000. To the upper left there, we increased the separation payout for $150,000 in the budget this year. Special department, as I mentioned earlier, is items that the department would need to use for the operations, $73,000. Building maintenance increased by $27,000. Special event, we've also increased by $26,000. And I just want to move to the right real quick, just to show there's the list of the special event that we have here. This year's budget at $249,000. 24 events, even though that this list does not show all 24, but there's 23, 24 events that we actually hold throughout the year. Namely, there's Independence Day event for $105,000, dumpling and beers for $30,000, and there's there's handfuls of summer concert and movie that we have during the summer months for $30,000, Lunar Lanterns Festival for $15,000, and more Cinco de Mayo holiday tree lighting fall fun festival that we continue to hold annually. Looking to the bottom left, that's the allocations that I mentioned earlier that goes into our 3 internal service fund to provide vehicle fleet maintenance to our fleet. There are information technology support to all departments, as well as risk management for a total increase of $274,000. This slide provides a general fund expenditure list or a chart by department in dollars and then percentage of the general fund, totaling $55.42 million that Will have mentioned earlier on in our presentation. Together, we call this the operating budget. So it does not include any transfer out or one-time expenditure on this chart for all of the ones that I've mentioned earlier. No transfer to the mission playhouse. So this is just general fund operating. So like other cities, public safety expenditure do make up the majority of the budget expenditure, followed by the public works, as you can see. So going right down the list, you can see from each of the department, police, fire, public works, community development, community services, for the proposed budget for the fiscal year 25-26 and the respective percentage, percentage of the general fund. And let me have Will come up again to move to our 5-year forecast.
Thank you, Linda. So moving on to the general fund 5-year forecast, we'll specifically look at the net change in fund balance and our fund balance reserves. So here is a chart of our 5-year forecast. We start with 25-26, that's the base year, that's the proposed budget tonight, and then we incorporate assumptions and we roll it out for the next 5 years. Some of the assumptions include revenue increases between negative 3% for interest, up to increases of 4% for property taxes, expenditure increases for between 3% and 7%. Some of the notable ones in the model years, there is a 3% salary adjustment baked in to the forecast. There is also a 3% vacancy factor that we began this year. That's also in the forecast. We've included $250,000 contribution to the OPEB trust, and we exchange $350,000 in Prop A every third year. So we exchange it in 25-26, and then the next year would be in 28-29. As you can see, the little spike in net change in fund balance. And there's also $550,000 for one-time capital purchases in the models as well. So just a couple of the lines to note. You got the blue line, the net change in fund balance. So this is revenues minus expenditures. So for this proposed year, $933,000. And you can see that it is positive and it's pretty consistent throughout 2031. And then we take that net change in fund balance and then we add the beginning fund balance. And then for the reddish line, ending fund balance, this is our ending fund balance for the general fund, essentially our entire reserve level. And then we have our fund balance percent, our reserve percent, our general fund balance, a reserve percentage, where we take the ending fund balance and we divide it by total expenditures and transfers out. And you can see that throughout the 5 years that it's around 39. It stays pretty steady as expenditures increase, but we have a little bit of increase in net change in fund balance. And then here's a chart that kind of illustrates the net change in fund balance. So the blue bars are the net change in fund balance each year. You can see 25, 26, and then in 28, 29, there's a little bit of spike. That's the Prop A exchange. And then our fund balance, our general fund balance reserve percentages, pretty level across the board. And then moving on to our fund balance reserves. So our assigned contingency reserve target in accordance with our policy is to have a reserve percentage of 17 to 25% of general fund expenditures. Once we meet our 25% contingency reserve target, then we begin committing fund balance to funding our OPEB liability, as well as committing funds for capital replacement. So in the table below, you can see that in the line that we meet our 25% assigned reserves across the board for all the years. And then you can see that we're able to add a little bit of funds for our OPEB funding as well as our capital replacement. So, and then here is a bar chart of demonstrating our 25% assigned general fund contingency reserves increasing each year, and then the orange bar and the blue bar, those funds committed to OPEB funding as well as capital replacement. So that's the 5-year forecast. Now we'll move into our internal service funds, our 3 internal service funds and our 21 special revenue funds. So here are our 3 internal service funds. These are funds that provide centralized services to other departments within the city. So we have our fleet services, and some of the highlights of the fleet services is that we set aside $400,000 for vehicle replacement. And in this year's budget, there's $138,000 budgeted for the replacement of 1 fire vehicle and $75,000 for the equipping of police vehicles. And then under risk management, this is where we have our workers' comp and general liability that we contract with the JPIA. They're both scheduled to increase, $157,000 and $153,000 respectively. And then we have our information technology internal service fund, and slight increase in this fund of $82,000, and we budgeted $30,000 for continue the facility camera project, as well as some funds for the McGordy renovation. So moving on to special revenue funds. Special revenue funds are those funds that have resources that are restricted for a particular purpose. On the left side is the restricted purpose: transportation, public safety, community services, utility, and other. And then we have the various funds that fall into those categories. So under transportation, we have funds like gas tax, Prop A, Prop C, a total of $4.9 million. Public safety, asset forfeiture, Office of Traffic Safety grants, $206,000. Community services, that's Mission Playhouse, the CEBG and Community Services Activity Fund of $2.1 million. Utilities, sewer and stormwater, $2.2 million. And then we have some other special revenue funds, our development impact. We have other grants, the retirement fund that we've talked about, in our AQMD fund. So a couple highlights on 2 of our special revenue funds. So we've talked about the retirement fund. And so here is basically an income statement of the retirement fund. So we're projecting to end this year, begin next year, with $325,000 in fund balance. We have projected tax revenue. It is property tax based, so it increases as property values increase, of $10.3 million. And the proposed transfer out to the general fund is $11.9 million, projecting with an ending fund balance of $1.2 million. So the largest expenditure in the retirement fund, related to the retirement fund, is the unfunded accrued liability. It's volatile as the assumptions for the pension are met or exceeded. That liability goes down, and the biggest assumption being the return on investment. So we're currently in a valuation where the return on investment was negative 6.1%, so our liability is increasing. There was also an increase related to the assumptions for the standard salary increase, but those are amortized over a 20-year period, so the older liabilities that are on there will eventually be paid off. We'll have a $1.1 million paid off related to our side fund. And then on the other side of it, our property tax revenue will continue to increase, but there will be still a challenge with the liabilities that will continue to come on board. But we'll continue to monitor it, and as property values increase and our property taxes increase, and as new actuarial valuations are published related to new return on investments. So there will be, this next return on investment, I believe, will have where the return on investment exceeded the 6.8%. So there will be a credit, if you will, in the valuation. But we'll continue to monitor it and continue to report on it. And then our Mission Playhouse, so we're projecting that it will end the year with a $209,000 fund balance. The Projected the revenue that the Mission Playhouse will generate is $713,000. There's a budgeted transfer of $629,000, proposed expenditures of $1.5 million, and it's projected to end the year at a net zero fund balance, kind of. And so as we've been doing over the years, we'll continue to monitor the Mission Playhouse as the strategic planning process continues to move forward. And then a quick look at citywide staffing. We looked at general fund earlier. So there are a total of 205 authorized and funded full-time positions. It's one increase based on the prior year adopted. And then you can see the numbers, and then you can see a visualization of where the majority of those positions are. So our capital improvement plan, CIP. So this bar chart demonstrates the funding by category, the new funding of $2.7 million for the 7 projects, and on the next slide we'll kind of look at the detail. But this is just the category where the new funding will be implemented for next year. So the largest portion of that is for intersection improvements at $1.4 million. And then here are the projects for 25-26. There's a total of 7 projects that are receiving an additional funding of $2.7 million. And then the largest intersection improvement project is related to the Mission Las Tunas intersection improvement of about $1.5 million. And then kind of coming to the conclusion here. So we're having the budget study session tonight where we're initially presenting all the work that staff has done to put this budget together. We're just in the beginning stages. From here, there will be multiple opportunities to continue to discuss the budget. And after tonight's meeting, beginning on April 28th through May 8th, we'll conduct individual meetings with council members to further review and discuss the proposed budget in greater detail, as we do every year. And then on May 22nd, 2025, we'll have an informal community budget presentation. That's a Thursday. That'll be approximately at 6 p.m. at a place to be determined. We're looking maybe at the Blossom Hall Community Room, or maybe a place in near the Mission Playhouse. And then so after having those discussions and having those meetings, then on June 3rd, we'll bring the budget back at a public hearing where now we'll review the budget again, and the operating budget and capital improvement budget and the appropriations limit. And if the council so chooses, they may adopt the budget at that meeting. If further discussion is needed, then we can continue the public hearing to June 17th. And then at that date, we can have that date to adopt the budget. And then on July 1st, 2025, the new fiscal year will begin. So the recommendation is we're presenting the budget tonight. It's to review it, to discuss it. We're presenting it to the public. We're not asking for any official action at this moment. And then after tonight's meeting, as mentioned earlier, we'll move into the additional discussions in future dates. So that concludes the presentation. I can take any questions that you may have, or Linda, and then also the departments are here to answer questions about their budgets as well.
Okay, thank you, Will. Does any council member have factual questions for staff to clarify the report? Okay, Councilmember Wu. Oh. Too nice.
But this is good manner as a council. But thank you so much, Will, and thank you so much, Linda. And what a great team, and thank you so much for the presentation. My question is, I understand the general fund that shows here projected 933,000 surplus. Does that projections include any pending cost of living adjustments or anticipate labor negotiation?
Yeah, thank you, Councilmember Wu. So that 933 is based on the salaries as of to date. So there are no incorporated cost of living allowances in the salary numbers.
Got it. So with the reserve projected at 39.34%, is that right? So that is well above the city's limit, not limit, but the 25% policy target. Have we considered to reallocate the surplus towards accelerating the OPEB contribution? Because that is part of the state auditor. They have removed us from the list. Then is that something that will be considered?
The way we're kind of, designing our how we're handling our reserves is once we meet our 25% goal, then we're committing the additional fund balance to OPEB and funding the other post-employment benefit trusts. So that would pay down our OPEB liability, as well as committing funds to future capital replacement.
I see. About a TOT one, the transient occupancy tax that is projected to fall below last year's budget, is that we are still doing the numbers from this current two hotels, Sheraton and Hilton? Have we include the Career by Hilton that may be open by the end of the year?
Yes, council member. So for the 5-year projection, we included that we projected just a small portion, I think $100,000 additionally in TOT, that that hotel would open on January 1st, 2026. So there's a small portion built in to the budget.
It's only a small portion. It's not, so it's still very conservative.
Very conservative, yes.
I see.
Very conservative.
I think that's it. I mean, that's conclude my question for now. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Vice Mayor Chan?
Yes, thank you. Thanks, Will and Linda. You guys do a great job. Just for my understanding again, and this is let's see if I can find it in the presentation materials. But I know it's in the staff report too, but on the presentation slide, slide number 9, the general fund revenue composition pie chart and the chart. When it talks about the general fund revenue composition, the different where the city gets our money, the taxes and all that. Can you please remind me what transfers in is and how that works, like the mechanics of?
Yes, council members. So the transfer in is the way that works is we transfer in money from the retirement fund into the general fund to pay for the CalPERS pension cost.
Oh, okay.
So it's a transfer from the retirement fund into the general fund.
Okay, so the retirement fund is just it's just another one of our funds that's separate. And then
Exactly, yeah. It's a special revenue fund, so it's a transfer out of the retirement fund into the general fund, a transfer into the general fund to pay for the CalPERS pension costs incurred in the general fund.
Okay, pay CalPERS. Thank you. Also, I guess, well, this is just kind of just to clarify for me. When we talk about our Prop A funds that, we do that discounted exchange thing every couple of years, I guess, is it correct that our RIDE SG program qualifies as a Prop A project?
That's correct,
So,
yes.
so because that qualifies, then I guess it would be within our purview as council to decide during this budget process whether we want to keep some of those funds to allocate more toward our RIDE SG program because it does qualify. And that would be our call, I guess, in terms of yeah, if we want to keep more to spend on our transportation programs instead of selling them all. Is that-
Yeah, that is definitely the council's prerogative to
Okay.
determine how they want to use those funds.
Okay, thank you. That's all I have for now, but thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Avila Herrera, or Avila, sorry.
Thank you, Mayor. Two questions. Well, thank you for such a great presentation. I mean, I can only imagine how much work that it took to get all these numbers, but it looks very organized and really on point. With so much uncertainty right now with the government, I just would like to get a little bit of assurance and that our city is taking steps and being more conservative, given that the fact that we don't know where we're going to be sometime later this year with the economy. And that's one question, and after that, we'll ask another question.
I think from a conservative approach, is the reserves that we've built up, the nearly 40% of reserves. So if we did need to weather some difficult times, we do have the reserves built up. And, as far as the revenue projections, they're, on the conservative side. So, those are kind of the two factors. It's short-term looking. We do have the 5-year forecast where we kind of project out and just kind of see where we'll be in the future. But if we did get into, difficult times, we do have the reserves that are built up, which would help weather us during that time.
Excuse me. Also, if we need to make adjustments, we always have our mid-year budget, we have our quarterly budget. We have in the past paused
Okay,
and
good.
made sure we, whether it's personnel or certain capital improvements or whatever the case may be, we always have that option to pause. That gives you reassurance.
Good, yeah. It's just so much uncertainty right now. We don't know where we're going to be. City looks like it's doing pretty well. The last question revolves around licenses and permits. I did see and hear that you said the permits are decreasing by 100,000. Can you just elaborate a little bit on why that's the case?
Licenses and permits, we have it decreasing by $27,000, and then we had building permits, a decrease of $100,000. So it's a comparison. So the way we developed the budget is we looked at, the prior year. We looked at the trend. We looked at a historical trend. And so based on the historical trend, it looks like it should be about $100,000 lower. Still conservative, but it's a very volatile revenue, as a large project that may occur could, spike it, and then it would be an outlier. But based on the trend, conservatively, it seemed best to reduce it by $100,000 from the prior year.
Yeah, thank you.
Anyone else?
Oh.
Oh,
Sorry, may I have one more question?
Sure, Vice Mayor.
Councilman Dean? Kind of in the same, similar to what I asked about transfers in to the general fund, then there's the transfers out from the general fund, and maybe I missed it. Do we say that the majority of that, or a large part of that, is to the Mission Playhouse?
That's correct. There's a $629,000 budgeted transfer to the Mission Playhouse.
Okay.
Of the 1.36 million.
Okay, and various other
One-time
projects like that.
one-time projects.
Projects, I see.
One-time.
Great, thank you.
Great, thank you.
Do you want to add something?
I just want to make one more point for transfer out. Other
Yes.
than transferring to the Mission Playhouse,
Yes.
we have half of that is still general fund, but going to special projects.
Special
So
projects.
for the most part, like we're seeing here, other than a transfer in, everything is operating year to year to year, just continuous from year to year. But we separate special project, put in transfer out to another special project fund, so that way we're separating and understand what is one time
Okay,
and see the regular operating that we need from year to year.
I see. Okay, thank you. Thank you. Councilman Dean?
Councilmember Ding?
Yeah, it's also the transfer in and transfer for how it's related. Okay, for the transfer in for the general fund, So transferring in, it's for my understanding, is first of all, it's from special revenue fund.
Yeah,
It's
special retirement fund.
Retirement fund,
Yeah.
it's especially I think it's from our property tax. We have some portion for the retirement fund.
Yeah, that,
So,
that-
so you just transfer from there to our general fund, not for our reserve for the CalPERS fund.
Yeah, exactly. So there's property tax that the retirement fund generates, and then the general fund incurs CalPERS pension cost. And then whatever that CalPERS pension cost, the retirement fund will send money over to pay for the CalPERS pension cost.
Okay, but that's the budget if we don't have the reserve. If we have a reserve, because right now, if we hit 25%, we transfer the reserve fund some portion to CalPERS. That fund, when we will be used for that fund?
Well, there's two ways that we incur CalPERS pension costs. We have they call it the normal retirement, that's just the day-to-day. And then we have the unfunded accrued liability. So if the accrued liability, which is the largest portion, because that's being amortized over a 20-year period, if that got paid off, then there would be more, there would be more retirement funds than necessary to transfer to the general fund at that point. But we're still probably quite a few years from that point.
I think Councilman Ding, what he's referring to is, or what you're referring to, and Will, what Councilman Ding is referring to, is our OPEB, which is the retiree health. And our fund balance policy has us set aside anything above 25% of our reserves, which is the number you were talking about. A portion goes into future capital projects.
Yes.
And another portion gets set aside for OPEB. We have a couple of $1 million in that fund now. It would be at council's discretion in the future when to send that to the trust up at CalPERS. For now, we're keeping it in our general fund because it allows us flexibility if we were to ever hit an economic downturn, or let's say we wanted to build a new police facility or remodel. We could still use that money if we wanted to for those purposes because it is still general fund discretionary money. But in our fund balance, we earmark that towards OPEB. So in the future, if it grew to a point where we felt comfortable, council could decide to send that to OPEB for the trust or use it to pay that year's ongoing OPEB cost and therefore save the general fund money in that way.
So actually, we propose it's not just put on reserve. We don't use it.
That's right.
Until we really want to, maybe the CJPIA or the CalPERS, they want to increase our city, the portion, then we discuss to transfer.
That's right. So that makes up.
Actually stay with it.
That's right.
Okay.
We have the flexibility if it stays with us. If we were to send it up to PERS and put it in the OPEB trust, we only have flexibility for that year's payment. So it gets deposited and it grows, but we lose our ability to pull that back down and use it in the future.
Okay,
So
yeah,
that's why we keep
that's
it.
I want a conservative. So really want to have this just for in case for the disaster or something. Really want it. Okay, thank you, Will. Do a good job. Yeah, and another thing is still regarding the sales tax. I saw you have the 3 category. One is a major SG, and another one is called a state sales tax. Another one is called a sales tax, a PSAF. So what's that meaning? But it's a small portion, but and also you expecting it's a decrease.
Yeah, so it's just a small portion. I think that's related to the Public Safety Augmentation Fund. I think there's a state mandate for like a 0.15% sales tax that the state gets, and then they allocate it out to the cities based on a formula that they have. So it's a state mandated sales tax funded for public safety augmentation.
Okay, they have the formula to
Yes,
Okay.
and we monitor it with the help of our
Okay.
third-party HDL to track it and forecast it.
The one more question, it's recently, the last year, we approved the sales tax for the statewide. It's county or statewide? Countywide. So I think it increased to 0.25. So this portion right now, they just only hold by the county, or it's have some portion to go to every city, have some shared portion?
I'll answer that, Will, only because I've been involved in some meetings with the COG. The County Board of Supervisors just approved a methodology last week on how that's going to be portioned out to the cities. And the lion's share will go to the county and the city of Los Angeles. And then there'll be a formula based on our point-in-time homeless count that each of the cities in LA County receives. And then that will trickle down to the cities. For our funds, since they're smaller than what would be practical to do projects on our own, our funds go to the COG. And the COG, that's how we fund the LACADA, the group that gave the presentation a few weeks ago about the outreach they do. So those outreach programs, as well as providing beds for the folks in our city and the other cities that commingle those funds.
So not to come to our city, just go to the COG or county host.
To the COG, not to the county, but yes, to the COG. And then through our votes at the COG, we have the ability to control that.
Okay, all right, thank you, Mark. Thank you, Mayor.
Yeah, and let me get clarification on his comment. I thought he was referring to, there is a whole separate tax that we either take it or they'll take it from us. And we took it. I think it was like 0.75%. Wasn't that the case? I think we're talking about two different things here.
I think we are. The Measure SG, when we proposed that tax, one of the reasons that our voters voted for it was because the county was taking all of that cap space when they were adopting taxes. And so if we didn't do it, then the county would. So that's where our 0.75% tax comes in. But it's going to happen again because the tax that Councilman Ding is referring to, it overrides the tax that the county put on several years ago with Measure H, which was the former homeless funding that was going to sunset in 2026. So it's been replaced with a new half-cent sales tax. All of that means there'll be another quarter-cent sales tax that is up for grabs. And the cities that I've talked to are going to propose doing an additional quarter-cent sales tax in 2026 with the assumption that if we don't do it, the county's going to take it again. And just like Measure SG, it might be better to bring that in-house. One of the special projects that is on the list that Will showed for this year is a ballot and education outreach consultant, and part of what they will be working with us on is whether we want to consider adopting another, similar to Measure SG, a quarter-cent sales tax, that if we don't take it, somebody else will. So I think there are a couple different ideas there.
Oh, okay, yeah. So thanks to the Mark to clarify. For the way past the Measure SG, that's 0.75. That's total, every dollars come to the city.
Correct.
Right. Okay, and but I got you mentioned your current. So counties change the cap for the sales tax too.
No,
So
well, they got
they
us.
say the 10.25. That's the maximum they can do. But that's I want to asking right now. If any people come to our city to consume it, so how much total the sales tax will be? The business owner they need to charge.
You're right. The county was able to carve out an exception to that 10.25 cap. So I believe the tax rate in San Gabriel right now and all of our neighbors is 10.5, where it used to be 10.25.
Okay, but you say if we don't submit it, so what's the another quarter%? What's the guideline?
If we don't do anything with that, it will drop off, and so it would be 10.25% for our residents or anybody who shops in the city. But essentially, the county or one of the other taxing districts could come in and use that extra 0.25%, and then that wouldn't come back to San Gabriel. It would go to wherever the taxing district.
I see. So we don't need to do anything, or we have to do some action?
We would have to put it on a ballot, similar to Measure SG, and our voters would have to approve. A majority, 50% plus one of the voters would have to approve us adding that quarter-cent sales tax.
It's additional quarter sales tax, we can,
It's additional over the already 75 cents that we receive from Measure SG.
so total would be 10.75.
No, I'm sorry. It would be under that, 10.5.
Still another 10 point. Oh,
Yes.
I mean the 2026, the Measure H will be.
Will drop
expired,
off. That's right.
It's a drop off another 25,
That's right.
0.25%.
That's right.
Okay, all right, good. Thank you, Mark.
Mark,
Councilmember or Avila?
Mark, just point of clarity, you said 50%, is that 60? I think we had a conversation earlier that you said 60%, maybe I'm confusing that?
That there are two different ways that taxes get adopted. If it's a general tax, meaning it could be used for any government purpose, then it requires just a majority. So
Got
50%
it.
plus one. That's a sales tax, is a general tax. If you were to adopt, let's say you wanted the sales tax, but you wanted to say it's only to be used for a library, that makes it specific, and then it requires.
Or the fire,
66
or the police station?
or police station. In the case of the proposal that we were talking about, where it would be a parcel tax, that would be 66 and 2/3. So 2/3 of the voters would have to approve that.
Thank you.
Great. Okay, I just had one clarifying question. Oh,
Hey,
Vice
one more.
Mayor. I guess I
Madam Mayor,
don't.
man, one more.
One more, Vice Mayor.
Just real quickly, just for my verification, I guess, or because I'm curious, in terms of the transfers in, the way you described, that it goes, it's money that's, funds that go from the retirement account into the general fund account to pay for the CalPERS. And maybe this is kind of wonky accounting rules and the legal way they have to do it. Why is it that it needs to do that, go through that process instead of just paying it through the retirement fund? Or is it just the way the state rules say we have to move it and then pay it?
You know, no, both of those ways could be correct. You know, you could, if you wanted to, you could incur all of your CalPERS pension costs in the retirement fund, and the expenditures would be in there. And then, obviously, the retirement revenue would be in there. And technically, that would still be correct. It would, your general fund expenditures would lose all of that, that pension cost. So determining like your total true cost of your general fund would be lower because you're not putting your CalPERS pension costs in there. So I think with the way we do it here, we keep all of the expenditures in the general fund so we know how much our general fund is incurring, and then we can bring in that revenue to pay for it. So
Oh, okay, so it's just a difference in presentation and the way we prefer to, you know, keep things where we deem to be clearer to the public, or, oh, okay, I see. Thanks,
Great.
Madam Mayor.
Okay, thank you for all the questions. I just have one last one, just clarification. We went on this hunting expedition for the farmer's market. I know we've discussed it extensively. I know we've decided as a council about this. I couldn't see it anywhere. Maybe it's buried somewhere, but I know that, we kind of put a pause on it because, we have a staff shortage, but we've hired someone, and hopefully we can reignite the process. But where would that be, the farmer's market? I know it's in there somewhere, I just couldn't see it.
You want to answer that one, Mark?
Oh, okay.
I'd be happy to. It's in our current year's budget, but for next year, because we don't have an idea of whether that will cost us anything or not, there is not a line item in that budget. As you mentioned, we do have a new staff member on board, and one of her first tasks is going to be rekindling that RFP for a provider, an operator, better word, thank you. And when we bring that agreement back, if it requires the city to either do marketing or outreach or a cost to pay for the operating, then we would recommend at that time council allocate that money.
Okay, so everything is in the current budget right now relating to the farmer's market.
That's
Do you
right.
know what that number looks like?
It was about $24,000
Okay.
for the year, but for next year, there's zero. So we would have to allocate fully whatever our cost would be for next year.
Okay, because I know we agreed on it, we voted on it, so.
Right.
Vice
Actually,
Mayor?
yeah, a related question, I guess, that if and when the farmer's market, new farmer's market comes to fruition, would it be administered through community services or economic development? Or we would just decide, or staff would figure out which department wants to spearhead or take the responsibility for?
It would be a combination of all of that. The economic development staff are going to be doing the RFP, and just depends on how staff intensive it's going to be once we bring that new operator on board. And then we'll decide at that point where it lives
Right.
best.
Okay, great, thanks.
Yeah, I'm sorry, just to follow up to that. So when you do decide, is it coming back to council, or do we already have enough discussion to provide direction? I can't remember, it's been a while now.
It will eventually come back to council because we will have an agreement with that operator that council will approve. But you've given us the authority or the direction to find a new operator and bring that operator back.
That part I do remember. Okay.
Yeah, I
Councilmember
think-
Ding?
Yeah, I agree the mayor and the vice mayor for the farmers market. So we should be still put on the budget on that to just in case, if with staff you can find us some farmer market to help. Yeah.
The problem is, I think Mark is saying, we just don't know. We have money set aside, but we don't know how much more we're going to need. So it's hard to even come up with a number for next year, but we have 24,000 set aside for this year.
It's already have
Yeah,
24,000. Okay.
It's in the current budget, not
Okay.
for the next year's, but the 2025 budget,
But for the
2025 to 6.
2025 to 2026, it's 24,000.
No, it's for
That's
the
zero.
24-25 budget. It's 25,000.
So,
25,000.
but I feel that you want to put on a budget too, right? That's my
I
understanding.
do, but if we're going to spearhead that soon, because now we have a body to actually lead it, because that was given to somebody else who's left. So we've been short in our economic development department, so that's been put aside. But they're going to start with it, do the RFP, and we'll be in a
Okay.
better place. And again, remember, we can't always amend it, but I think 24,000 was a number that but was come up, it wasn't done blindly. There was some analysis that was done to come up with that number.
That's right. That was the marketing cost, which we ended up using part of it for marketing, and then we ended up paying the operator to try to keep them viable for a few weeks before we ended up shuttering the farmer's market. We could absolutely throw a placeholder into the budget if council would like to see it in the budget under the special events. The problem with that is if we could get anywhere from, $0, where as long as we provide them with the space, they'll do it for free, to, $100,000 a year, which was one of the proposals from the group, we would have to pay them $100,000 a year. So that's enough of a swing where it would be difficult to put a placeholder in there, but we certainly can if that's the direction of council.
Okay.
Okay,
So
great.
have this direction or not?
Well, from 0 to 100,000, maybe it would be better to wait for the RFP to come. It'll come before,
So on a midterm, so we can update it.
we can always update it.
Update the budget.
Yes.
Right. Okay. All right. Good. Thank you.
Okay, Councilmember Herrera Avila?
Since you're sparking more questions, I would like to, just a clarification. So would that go under special events? Would we would that be considered a special event? And would it go under like maybe an other or like a placeholder there? Or where will we maybe see that?
And the short answer is it would likely go into that special events. That's where we had that in the past because we consider that, although it's frequent, it's one of our community engagement kinds of activities. And Mayor Menchaca, I should point out, we have the formal agenda set up with factual questions and then
Oh, I
the
know. I'm
discussion.
sorry. Yes.
But I'm pointing that out, you don't need to run it that way because we're not looking for a vote or direction. So if you wanted to just keep the free flow discussion.
Well, the next item says, it's now time for council discussion. So I feel like we're having the discussion.
just-
So if I need to say it, I'll say it. And so who would like to start? And so now we're having a discussion. So continue on, Mr. Councilmember Herrera.
Yeah, so when we're talking about special events, Mayor, I love the idea of having it being like a line item there. But what I would also like to see if we can either add another event or strengthen maybe the Cinco de Mayo event and add more budget to that eventually, to maybe have include like a Noche Lucha, what is it called? Lucha Libre incorporated on that. Or maybe even tequilas. We got dumplings and beer. Why not tequilas and tacos? I mean, that might be, as successful as dumplings and beers. But I would definitely be in favor to support, and I would like to see if council would like to do that too, because where we're getting at, what I'm understanding is that, Mayor, you want this event for the community, right? Because it was such a great event, but it just didn't have traction. So I like where you're going with that, but I would also like to see some of these events being strengthened with a little bit more of backing with money.
Okay, so I agree. I mean, we can have more events, but I would caution, just because today, anytime we decide on an event, we have to flush it out. We have to understand, well, what is that going to look like? What are the costs? What are the staffing? Because again, we are short still, at least with economic development until that person starts, and then we're also short in another department. If we want, I completely agree. I think we can consider other events, but I think we need to have a special session for that. And today it's about direction. Well, it's hard to give direction if we don't know the cost or the staffing or what does that really look like. And so I would like to maybe have an agenda item to discuss more, but tonight I think they just need direction. And without having those key data points, I think it's really hard. I mean, there's so many other things we could do. I would love to hear from community services. Do they have the capacity, the deep bench? I don't think so. I think their bench is pretty. I mean, every person has so much to do right now. You look at the events, and maybe it doesn't look like a lot, but each one of them needs so much staff time. And then again, what does that mean? Your tequila and tacos, great idea, but what is that going to look like? And where are we going to fit this all? Could we, like in the past, what we've discussed is maybe combining some things so we don't have to have, let's take Independence Day. It used to be called Kids Day plus Independence Day or something like that. Well, we just merged it into Independence Day event. Maybe there's some things we can do, but that takes more thought. It takes more strategy. But I'm completely on board. But I think tonight we need to kind of move forward, and that's something that Mark. That's something we can kind of talk about later down the road. But for tonight, you just need to know if there's anything significant that we need to come up with. Is that acceptable or, okay, great. Because apparently Councilmember Ding is excited too about farmers market. I think we all are, but let's talk, and well, I know you are. Yeah, I know you are. You are our master when it comes to the farmers market. You're very good about that. So I hope I can have some kind of support there that let's just be strategic about it, because I think it's important. I think we also had a meeting, and I can't remember now, but maybe you can, where we looked at all our projects and all our events and it started, merging them together or eliminating them or looking at it differently. Holiday tree lighting was another one where we've taken a whole different approach, and I think it's more exciting. We have the little train now. We actually had snow. There's so much more we've done with it. So I just want to be real mindful of our staff. I know, again, I'm using sports analogies, but, we don't have that bench yet. Maybe we will. But each one of them is just exhausting. And the reason I'm saying is because we just had the Kiwanis event, and, I'm part of the planning from the Kiwanis perspective, and just the level of detail that's involved, I can only imagine for our staff. And so, anyway, any other discussion? We are now at the discussion point, and Will is standing there waiting for any more questions. Did we? Okay. Councilmember Wu?
Thank you, Mayor. I just have another quick questions about one-time expenditures and capital projects. I remember that a couple years ago that I have received an email from, I believe, Angela. It's about the funds that we got from Assembly Member's office. It's a $300,000 something to repair the breach. So actually in the report that I do see like Lugo Park Bridge repairs and Smith Park shelters renovations, they're also included in our report. So if we are applying those funds, since we have a grant writing service, so, I mean, when we have a budget here, would that be affecting the willingness of funding from other agencies that were supposed to support us?
Councilman Wu, that's actually,
Yes.
believe it or not, a second bridge at Vincent Lugo Park. We have two bridges.
Right.
So the one that you're referring to that we received
That was the
funding
first
for,
one.
that was the first one. That's the one that spans the wash and goes to the street that's north of the Hilton. And that one is being funded with grant funds that we received, the email you're referring to from Angela, and we're designing that project now. The second bridge is the vehicle bridge that we use in the park to drive over to get to the park's yard that's in the back of that facility.
Yes.
And that is, we're going to do that in-house. So that's not something that needs engineering or an outside consultant. We are just going to replace the rotting timbers that are on that. We have not applied for grant funds for that project because we don't have any that would qualify for. So it won't affect any of those other projects. But our new grant writing team does scour for different grants. In fact, we submitted one last week through Judy Chu's office, Congresswoman Chu's office, to try to get funding for a new playground at Smith Park, as well as the picnic shelters that some of the costs you see in that one time. So if some of those, we need to show that we have matching funds, so we're already earmarking those, and others, we need to be able to pay for those improvements if we don't get the grants, so we're starting to fund those in our budget as well.
I see. Okay, well, thank you.
Anyone else? I just had one question. Rebecca, would you mind coming up? Sorry, Will. I'm done with you. Did a great job. Both of you and Linda did a great job. So Rebecca, I know there's been years of a push to try to really get funding for our Smith Park. I know I saw the pool up there already. We're just going to set monies aside from that. But maybe you can just share how there might be grants out there, but there's certain things that get disqualified. In this case, this most recent grant, not the one that we qualified, but we thought we were going to qualify for, and we didn't. Could you just kind of share with that? Because I don't think people understand that these grants, although they might sound, grandiose, that, it's for parks, they are so specific. And there was one that we just didn't qualify for. Could you just share a little bit so we all kind of understand? We have grant writers, which is great, but you're still doing a lot of the drilling down and making sure that we check every box.
Thank you, Mayor. Yes, so we recently applied for the ORLOP funds, which is ORLP, so it's Outdoor Recreation Legacy Program, and that the pool did qualify for. So we submitted for that. Unfortunately, we will not find out probably until September if that's funded. So we've got some time to wait. These most recent funds that City Manager Lazaretto was referring to are an appropriation for Congresswoman Chu's office, and the pool was ineligible to be applied for those funds. But we did apply for, and these would be used as matching funds, for example, if we were to get the ORLOP funds, because the ORLOP had a 50% match. So we applied for, I think it was over $12 million. So the city would be responsible for over $6 million match. And so for the CHU funds, we applied for the building that is adjacent to the pool, so the changing rooms and restroom area, Dahlin, the group that council had approved us working with to kind of assess the pool and assess what could be done at that project, had recommended a picnic area that would be adjacent to the pool, kind of where the wading pool is now. We would remove the wading pool and would place a picnic area there, which would be a benefit to pool users as well as park users. And so we applied for that as part of the CHU funds, as well as the playground in that northeast part, as well as the replacement of the picnic shelters, the thatched roof shelters. In addition, we are looking to apply for, it's either LWCF or LCWF. I don't recall, they're all these acronyms, but we are applying for those funds as well, which are similar to the ORLOP funds, and that will be for the pool. And I believe that application is August. So we likely won't know about the ORLOP funds, but we will apply for the LWCF and take our chances. We are trying. We continue trying.
Well, you've been trying every year,
Yeah.
and I just want to applaud your staff for doing that. I don't think people have seen it, but I somehow I caught wind of it, and I know every year you're trying so hard, and it's just, well, you only need one win.
Right.
And we can get it all done, but I just want council and the public to understand that we're not idle. I mean, you're
Right.
working out there trying to find those grants, but the competition is very stiff.
Yeah.
Everybody seems to have an infrastructure issue with their parks and their pools. I remember when I first came on board, one of our biggest wins was Marshall Park. To get funding to create a new park, very few cities, especially a city like ourselves that's so built out already.
Right.
We had an opportunity to work with Garvey because they closed their school. And to have that park, it was phenomenal. It was a huge win. I just gotten elected, so it was
Yeah.
great. To walk into that, I did nothing, but actually, I did a little bit on the school board side.
We were very blessed that they were willing to work with us on that project.
That was,
And
that was wonderful.
the site is definitely better for it.
Yeah,
so.
so I just wanted to just make it very public that you have worked very hard every single year since I've been here. And, I just want to thank you for that. Even
you.
this weekend, you were carrying that letter, and I had to sign it right away. You were getting signatures at the last minute. Because unfortunately, some of the stuff, it's last minute.
Yeah.
It's like we need it on Sunday at 11:59. Never heard of a deadline like that with the government, but I guess they
Right.
had their reasons. So anyway, thank you for everything you do.
Thank you.
Okay, well, if there's no further questions, the next regular city council meeting will be held on Tuesday, May 6th at 6:30. Meeting adjourned at 6:49. Thank you.